We just came through eclipse season, and what a perfect time to learn more about the moon. And you can't get a better resource than Stephen Forrest's Book of the Moon, available on audiobook narrated by me. A direct link is available on the homepage of hightimelinebooks.com, or you can go to Audible or Apple Books. Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. We have one of our great listeners, Kimberly, left us a question, and I wanted to just synopsize what she was asking. Her dad's birthday was September 13th, and she noticed on his birthday, as she was looking at the transits of the day, her eyes fell down on her Honeycomb Collective Almanac, which I use for the Fun Astrology Podcast religiously. She noticed that her dad's sun on his birthday, which happens to be at 21 degrees Virgo, was within a 3-degree orb of a sextile to her ascendant. She goes, And it also was in a trine to her chiron. So, Robert, she was wondering a really great question. Can you use that kind of analysis to see how other people might impact you based on their sun?
Absolutely. There's an old rule of thumb in astrology. Anybody who is born with their sun, their natal sun, within 3 degrees of conjunct a natal planet in your chart will have a profound influence on your life according to that natal planet in your chart. It's almost as if their natal sun illuminates that planet in your chart. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Now, that was not what she was seeing. She was seeing a sextile to her ascendant. How does that factor in?
Well, you can read it that way too, because her father's sun, it's his natal sun, so it will always be at 21 degrees Virgo, whether it's his birthday or not. He as a human being, will always have an influence on her between his being and her natal ascendant, which is a sextile aspect and very positive. Also a trine to her chiron, which is another so just her father's being will tend to have positive influences and stimulation or heightened awareness of those two things in her chart if she will become aware of them and conscious. So he'd be a great person to be around for all things connected with her chiron and the house that it's in and the sign that it's in, as well as for her ascendant. And the ascendant, of course, is the most personal point in the chart. Changes 1 degree every 4 minutes of birth time. So the fact that her father's natal sun is within 3 degrees of a sextile to that is very positive.
If you see your father's sun in a square to your Mars, does that mean a possibly conflicted relationship?
Yes, absolutely. And you can even go further with that. You can take a person's son, like your father, your mother, or a lover, or a wife, or a husband, or a friend, or a business partnership, anybody else. See what house in your chart their sun falls in. My dad's sun falls in my 12th house. And it's been incredibly illuminating for me to know that, because that house does rule secret sorrow and self-undoing and all of that. And had I followed my father's modeling, I wouldn't be alive today. But because of astrology, which I got into at 21, that house also, when you make the 12th house conscious, then it becomes the house of hidden treasure. It's also the house of hidden support, you see. So when you make it conscious, Jupiter in the 12th, the old classic books, it's like having an angel over your shoulder. Venus in the 12th, the same way. Venus in the 12th will often bring sorrow and sadness and loss in connection with love, but it's still Venus. And even through the sadness and the sorrowful love experiences, there is an angel over your shoulder with Venus in the 12th. There's really an angel there when you have Jupiter in that house. But so you can look at these things in the same way as what house does a person's sun fall in your house? Because that will be the house that they will have some influences. If the closer they are, though, that sun, to a conjunction, the more powerful their influence will be in the nature, according to the nature of that natal planet in your chart that they're so close to. But you can absolutely read these aspects like sextiles and trines. We get even more information. So Kimberly's on the right track here.
All right, good. Kimberly, you're a good student. And you know what she picked up on, Robert, was the 3 degrees. She mentioned it in her question subtly, but she had picked up on that 3-degree orb. So when you're talking about, let's say, sun sextile ascendant, I guess the magic happens within that 3-degree window either side.
Yes, absolutely.
And then, is it only the sun? Or could you look at your Pluto if it's within 3 degrees of somebody else's Venus, for example? Would that have an impact?
Yes, it does. And there you're getting more into chart comparisons. When you begin to go away from the sun and look at all the other planets and how they relate to your chart, that's really chart comparison. But the overall influence of a person in your life is their sun conjunct within 3 degrees on either side of a natal planet.
You and I have this aspect in our charts comparison. My sun and your Venus, which is at 4 degrees Scorpio, are within 2 degrees of each other. And my sun, Mars, and Neptune, very powerful stellium in the 5th house of Scorpio, is within that orb.
Well, and you can see, Thomas, I mean, we met in Kepler College, where you were taking some courses of mine, and I realized then what a good astrologer you are. And then a couple of years ago, when you brought up the idea of doing these podcasts, well, your Mars in tune, your Sun, Neptune, Mars, and Scorpio are all conjunct my Venus and Scorpio in my 10th of career. So that's where you, as a human being, because it's your Sun, along with Mars and Neptune, that's where you impact my life, is through my Venus and Scorpio, through my career house. And boy, is that true.
Now let's flip that, because it's interesting. Your sun does not fall within 3 degrees of any of my planets on a direct conjunction.
Yeah.
So how does the interaction work then between if my sun is on your Venus, but your sun is not in an aspect with any of my things directly? How does that play out relationally?
Well, one of the ways may be, since you very directly hit by conjunction my Venus in my 10th house, you will have far more of an impact on my career. And it's favorable because it's Venus in my 10th house in Scorpio than I will have on yours.
Yeah, in fact, I'm just looking here that, don't know if we count this, but your sun and my midheaven are in a quincunx aspect.
Okay, well, that's neither here nor there, other than just constant adjustments.
Okay. Well, that is very interesting.
But it is, you see, because you've got a very direct impact through my 10th house Venus. And I don't apparently have any conjunctions. Let me look at your chart. If you got it, can put it up here for a second. I can glance at it and just see. Oh, I see. You got them both, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
It takes me a while, Thomas. So, yeah. So, well, okay. Then my sun is really, and my sun Neptune is conjunct your north node, which is also favorable.
Neptune the sun is 5 degrees away.
My Neptune's at 4 Libra. My sun's at 8 Libra. Your north node's at 343, almost 4 Libra. So it's exactly conjunct my Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
And within 3 degrees of my sun, because you have to figure that with my sun conjunct Neptune. So what, and that all falls.
That would be down in the 4th.
It's in your 4th. All right. So that's where my sun Neptune would hit your north node, is in your 4th house. So that's not your career, but that is your foundation. So that sun Neptune conjunction hits you in your north node. Now you have to associate the nodes with the moon, because that's where they're derived from. So, and the moon is the public, among other things. And your moon is, you're gonna have to read that moon both in the 4th house and your 5th house both, because the nodes are associated with the moon. And my sun Neptune conjunct your north node, there's a reflex action with my sun Neptune to your moon, which is on your 5th cusp of creativity and also self-employment, the broadcasting and the metaphysics, because you got that loaded 5th house, which is terrific for an astrologer or a metaphysician. So we connect very deeply that way between both charts.
Very interesting.
And then my midheaven is exactly on top of your moon. Well, within degrees.
Mm-hmm. And so is Mars.
And Mars as well, yeah.
In fact, the moon's about in a midpoint between those two.
Yep. So because it's your midheaven and Mars always has a lot to do with work anyway. In an indirect way, I will also have that kind of, it's positive influence on your career. It's just not as obvious or direct as yours conjunct my Venus in my 10th of career.
Well, I think folks can see, and I'll stick all these charts in the show notes, but you can see exactly how you can synthesize two people who are in some kind of relationship, partnership, whatever it is. Business in this case, might be personal, maybe you're romantic partners, maybe it's a parent-child chart that you're looking at. You could see how these things all fit together. Wow, very interesting. We put in the show notes of every episode all the information you need. We've got a Discord channel, and Robert's link for readings is in there. If you just check that out, it has all the latest of what's going on around the podcast. We also have a listeners group on Facebook. It's called the Subconscious Mind Mastery and Fun Astrology Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we are kind of reactivating that. We'd love to have you come join that if you're a listener. And we will see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day.